Hello and welcome into the KE Report. Chad and Corey here as your host, and we're chatting today and getting an update from Stillwater Critical Minerals. Stillwater Critical Minerals is traded on the TSX.V under the ticker PGE and on the OTCQB under the ticker PGEZF. And we are joined today with the president and CEO of Stillwater Critical Minerals, Mike Rowley. And Mike, always great to have you on the show. When we talked last time, you were up at the Core Shack in Montana with the whole team. This time we're diving into the news that you put out today here on Monday, the 27th of October, really highlighting the end or the completion of the drill season in 2025, 3,471 meters over 8 holes. Of course, we're still waiting on the assays from those holes, and we'll get back together and circle up when you get some of those in. But you do have some early indications just from how the core looks, and when you put this in concert with the drilling you did in 2023, you get around 5,800 meters drilled, and that's going to be building towards a resource estimate that your team plans to have out the first half of next year. So let's maybe start there with the drilling wrapping up for this year and just the work the team has done on the ground.
Oh, you bet, and glad to be back. Thank you. Yeah, the news, we've engaged the resource modelers that worked at Platreef before, Ivanhoe's mighty Platreef mine, and that was done, of course, with our Vice President of Exploration, Danie Grobler, and our modeling geologist, structural geologist, Albie Brits. That rapport is terrific. We're very happy with the core you mentioned that we saw this year. We ran 2 rigs, as you saw in earlier news releases, one on Crow Mountain, one on Iron Mountain. Drilled 3 deposit areas. We feel good about expanding in all 3, and we've certainly hit some nice looking core along the way too.
So, Mike, this is all playing into an updated resource. Last resource came out at the very beginning of 2023. Can you recap that resource and explain what's going to be added to this resource? Not just in the drilling, we know almost 6,000 meters, but in terms of mineral makeup, what we could be looking for.
Sure. Well, broadly, we expect the composition to be the same. We are targeting now better than ever in the mid and high grade scenarios. I think it's pretty obvious Stillwater is a big and well mineralized system. It looks like the Bushveld. That's why the Ivanhoe parallels are so relevant here. We're the first to complete the model, and this is the first resource we've done actually since that model debuted just about a year ago, last October. We've had some real breakthroughs at the Core Shack this summer, in fact, in terms of targeting higher grade within that. And we're excited to get that out. The compositional mix is broadly expected to be the same. Correct that we've got about 5,800 meters between 2 drill campaigns to bring in, plus some number of the 80 historic holes that we've not yet brought into a model. Current models are based on 156 holes and grew 62% with program that was, I think, 5,200 odd meters. So we're looking for a significant gain, especially in light of the model that we've just put out and then worked through summer. It's not as sexy as really nice core pictures or assay results, but the model worked beautifully this summer. We hit the AB chromites that we use as a marker layer, basically where we expected to, which was early proof that the model was working. We're excited about that. Compositionally, it's going to follow, we expect, the kind of pie chart that you see in our deck, right? In approximate order of value, nickel, then palladium, on down through the lesser PGM, well, platinum, rhodium, and then the lesser PGMs, which we actually don't currently inventory. Copper, currently 500 million pounds, and cobalt. Gold is there, and then we will continue to look closely at chromium as well. Very interested in that, lots of value there. Haven't assumed the metallurgy yet, and we're working on that piece as well.
Well, Mike, before we dig into some of those individual elements and even some of the elements that you may start to include some of the lesser PGMs that are starting to punch above their weight class, let's remind people listening, as we have in previous discussions, of the model from the Bushveld. I think people that are familiar with South African PGM deposits will understand that, what Ivanhoe has and what Anglo American has are a similar model. You're doing this in the Stillwater complex in Montana next to your neighbor Sibanye, but you have a different mineral model than Sibanye has, and that plays into this, and that's why you brought in Danie and Albie. So just remind people in simple terms, why this is so profound to have a giant complex with this kind of understanding, and then, as you just pointed out, how it informs future drilling.
Oh, you bet. Yeah, I mean, Stillwater Igneous Complex, to use the technical term, is in the top five globally for size in these layered magmatic systems. It looks a lot like the Bushveld, which is the biggest layered magmatic system in the world. Those two mines that you mentioned on the Platreef, being the northern limb of the Bushveld, Anglo American's Mogalakwena, 15 billion pounds copper nickel, 152 million ounces PGEs, even now after being mined since 1993. And then, of course, Ivanhoe's Platreef mine, which is literally entering production this month or next month. 8 billion pounds nickel copper, 95 million ounces PGEs. Big, beautiful discovery, proven up by Danie Grobler, who joined us, and Albie Brits modeled it. The Stillwater complex, the productive reef beside us, JM Reef, was actually found by direct application of the models from the Bushveld. The mighty Merensky Reef, 80% of the world's platinum, is actually in the same place in the stratigraphy as the JM Reef next door to us. One was discovered in the 1920s, one was discovered in the 1970s by direct application of that model. We simply got the stuff to the south, right? The bigger, more nickel, more copper, more diverse mineral suite, and probably better mine economics. If you look at Ivanhoe's Platreef mine, they're projecting to be right around $600 per 4E ounce mined. That's a palladium, platinum, gold, rhodium ounce. These are the kinds of really robust economics that we're looking at bringing to Montana. It's not crazy. It's been talked about by the USGS for decades, and even in past drill results by the company that was there before us. We're simply driving that home, and we've brought that Ivanhoe talent to the district. Back to resources and commodity suites, it means a really nicely balanced commodity suite, and that's part of what Glencore likes about us and why they've written 3 checks for us in 3 years.
Mike, I'm curious, just from an investor standpoint here, when you have a resource with so many different metals and certain ones that are getting more attention, other ones that are on the back burner, but at any time there can be investor interest and even government interest to come into these different metals. From the geological standpoint and management standpoint, where do you see some of the best value within the resource and within all the work that you're doing to advance all of these different resources and metals all in one big system?
It's certainly a harder pitch to be polymetallic, isn't it? Because the retail investors want you to be the flavor of the day. The biggest and most profitable, longest lasting mines in the world are polymetallics, full stop, including Mogalakwena on the Platreef Bushveld, or big scale gold, copper, porphyries or something. That simply is it. It really is a benefit to be diversified. When nickel popped a few years ago, people were happy to talk about our nickel component. Now I think it's the PGMs that are driving it. I mean, who else is expanding resources and actively drilling a platinum, rhodium, palladium resource beside a producing mine in the US? Sibanye Stillwater, their deposit, their operations are a thing of beauty. They're well liked by industry and locals. They will soon be the only producing PGM mines in North America with the closure of the Canadian, the Lactazile mines. That seems to be really punching above its weight right now. I notice we get a lot of attention on social media for our rhodium. And from what I can tell, we're the biggest rhodium deposit in North America disclosed as a rhodium deposit. These things are really relevant, and they resonate when they resonate. Platinum, we got 1.26 million ounces of platinum. Who else has a platinum resource beside a producing platinum mine that they're drilling? These are very beneficial commodities. We also have the lesser PGMs. We don't have them inventoried, but we know they're there, and it helps that Sibanye produces them too.
Well, Mike, let's dig into rhodium for a second, because we've talked in the past with you about how initially you weren't even assaying for it. You now assay it as a second step. You went through some of the old historicals as well as some of your old drill core and realized how significant it is. It's 4 or 5x, sometimes even 6x the price of platinum or palladium as far as rhodium prices. They move around a lot, but talk about why it's a serious co-credit in the project.
Yeah, it definitely punches above its weight, and then it distinguishes us because we're one of very few that have it in quantity. It's a very interesting element. You're absolutely right about the past assays. Kind of the funny thing about this project is, AMAX was assaying for copper, nickel, not usually the precious metals. Beartooth came in and in the 2000s, and they were sometimes assaying only for PGMs because they were focused on reefs. We were simply the party that brought it all together, brought all the data on the table, staked the entire district, and then did those assays that you described. We like to do rhodium in a second pass. We like to see what the other PGMs are running first and then target what intervals are assayed for rhodium. You've seen that in our past results. It definitely punches above its weight at $8,000 per ounce right now. And it's been identified by the Visual Capitalist just recently as topping the list in the US for potential disruption of GDP due to foreign sources. I think it was $64 billion or something, more than 6 times the next element. So it really punches above its weight.
So, Mike, on top of the PGMs and also tying in rhodium here, the battery metals, nickel, copper, cobalt, copper, very well known, but nickel, people haven't been paying as much attention to it recently, price wise at least. Cobalt is another one that I guess we should discuss. So, how should we value or view the more battery metals within this asset?
That is the bread and butter. It's not as sexy as the rest of it, but we don't often talk enough about our copper. We have 500,000,000 pounds right beside a producing US mine, and they already run they run 2 sulfide flotation concentrators and the smelter refinery complex. The nickel is the bulk of our value. Even now, it's probably in the 40% by value of that pie chart, over 1 billion pounds. You're absolutely right. It's not something that people want to talk about, except the contrarians, and we just saw some of them at Beaver Creek. There are people loading up on nickel because they're smart. These are cyclical businesses. You don't want to wait until it's peaking to jump in. Cobalt's an interesting one. We have 91 million pounds, and it's not in the Congo. Again, we punch above our weight on that, like rhodium. Cobalt's an interesting one. The US government recently gave up their ambitions to secure stockpiles, deals to purchase cobalt simply because they couldn't find price that they liked in the first world. We have 91 million pounds. That's half a kilometer from a producing mine in the US. They're definitely real. The battery market is significant. The energy storage market is significant. If you're talking about copper, the broader market is just grid electrification, AI, and nickel. It's still used primarily in alloys, which gets the military factor in there too.
Well, Mike, I think we'll broaden it out to a larger discussion on critical minerals. Your name, Stillwater Critical Minerals, sometimes conflates you with the critical minerals, the large basket of them now, I think almost 50 elements that are being considered critical or strategic that governments around the world are focused on. So when you see a lot of the news, like what's happening with China versus the US on their export controls on things like tungsten and antimony and looking at rare earths, that gets lumped into the critical minerals discussion, as does the deal that the US is working out with Australia, which actually triggered this call when we were emailing back and forth. I think it'd be fun for you to at least flesh out that when you're talking critical minerals, sometimes your stock gets swept along with those narratives, even though, as we've outlined here, you have a lot different critical minerals. So maybe talk to that topic.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I enjoyed our discussion by email. We do have criticalminerals.com. We are Stillwater Critical Minerals. So we understandably get put in that bin. But when you get a headline out, and I noticed multiple places just carried it through, that the US has cut a deal on critical minerals with Australia, I think that hit us a little disproportionately. We have none of the rare earths that are actually the subject of that deal. And in fact, the Stillwater complex doesn't have significant rare earths. Sibanye is not producing rare earths. So it's a little frustrating for us to get painted with that. Conflated was the word you used, and that was a good term. The overall premise is the same. China is using state money to control supply, dominate, and squeeze out Western producers. They did that with rare earths, I think, first. Now with the nickel, aluminum, copper smelting, we've seen the same thing. The playbook is the same, and Western operations are closing as a result. it's really good to see the current administration in the U.S. talking about floors on prices and making equity investments and funding juniors, because that simply has to be. If we're asked to compete at these prices, you aren't going to build mines. Generally in the West, a lot of mines are not economic. Back to rare earths, yeah, China controls 70% of the mining, 90% of the processing of rare earths, but the broader commodities list, as you noted, was more like 50 in the US right now, and we have 10 of them, but not the rare earths.
So, Mike, what does this mean about government relations then? Because that's been really the main driver here is the government moving forward, permitting wise and also funding wise. Some of this wide list of different minerals that seems to change week over week. What can you tell us about the minerals that you have at this asset and how they potentially could fit into government support on any front?
Yeah, the government is clearly moving down from the big producer names to the projects that are very near-term production and then on to projects like us, which could be accelerated, right? Like if ever there was one that could be moved through feasibility studies, I think it's us for all the reasons we've talked about and the fact that we're right next to Sibanye in a pro mining district. We're in front of the right people. It's all I can say about that. We're making very good progress on a funding request. We're also having the bigger conversations now about newer models. Those are starting here. The US government is definitely there. And frankly, I don't see the need to only fund via grant funding like we've seen historically. DPA Title III is generally the preferred channel. I think it's probably correct to look for other involvement as well. Putting a floor on pricing is a good one. Basically recognizing that there isn't a free market globally, that if other actors, China particularly, are willing to use state capital to push down price, then you don't have a free market and you may need to subsidize in some form. Putting a floor on price and giving us something we can take to a bank to build a mine is a really good mechanism. Clarity on permits, like you mentioned, is an important point for the government to step in. It's a little less relevant to us at Stillwater because we have such a good example next door, Sibanye and their good neighbor agreement. That's not our first concern. Getting this thing quickly through feasibility studies, growing the resources and completing those feasibility studies is our focus, and that's the subject of our conversations with government.
Well, Mike, I think you're being a little modest just because I know you've become a moonlighting politician just over the last year or two, visiting with a lot of the local and state and federal representatives, but in particular focusing on Montana, both sides of the aisle. And you've also had in the past some grant money that came out to different universities that you worked with on various studies. So you've already gotten in their Rolodex, I should say, and you're also in queue for looking at different things as far as bringing in funding or price floors, as you mentioned. So all that has Glencore interested, has your team interested, and has the investing pool interested. As we wrap up, let's just focus on the news that's coming. You've got these drill holes completed, but we still got to find out when the assays are coming. So give us a roadmap of the key news on tap.
Oh yeah, no, thank you. That's a good touch point. And on the subject of politicians, you're absolutely right. It makes a big difference when you can fly your congressman around the project as we did. You've seen it in our deck and talk to him directly about what this project needs, what the US needs, where that domestic supply chain could be. That makes a huge difference. And that's carried through with the other two senators and the one other congressman and the governor and the local politicians as well. News flow, yes. Assay Lab is running late. I know that people are used to hearing that. We actually have an email that explains why. We are several weeks behind on the timing of results, but after this news announcing the reunion effectively of the Platreef modelers with the Platreef team in Montana, drill results are it. We're excited to get those out. I think we'll put them out in tranches over the next couple of months, and then it's the bigger resource sometime in the new year. I think it'll be faster than the end of H1, which is what we're talking about. I just don't want to get into commitments on dates, given the fact that there's two tranches of assays. We have to do that rhodium and follow up, right? We'll do our best for the end of Q1, but it may fall into Q2, is I guess what I'm saying. Bigger picture, we hope to put out news on government initiatives, and I just don't know when that is. It's obviously something we're working on. And there's updates coming on non-core assets as well.
All right. Well, I think that gives us a nice snapshot. And yeah, we haven't even talked about all the other projects that you have in the stable that are also potential value levers for the company to pull. But we have touched on those in previous discussions, and I'm sure we will do it again when the news surfaces. We'll be looking forward to those assays when they come back in tranches, and we'll get you back on to unpack those and maybe shake the tree and get Danie on here as well to talk to us, because I know he does get excited and animated when he's talking about the results. And then obviously all of this building towards the bigger resource for the first half of next year, hopefully Q1, but maybe early Q2. Mike, there's a lot of news going on with Stillwater Critical Minerals. And so for people that are listening in, definitely click on the link below in the show notes. It takes you right over to the Stillwater Critical Minerals website, right to their news section. But it may be helpful to pull up the slide deck too and just dig into some of these targets and some of these minerals and have a lay of the land look with your own eyes at where this deposit is situated next to Sibanye and why it's so strategic to be here in the U.S. Mike, as always, great to have you on the show and looking forward to our next conversation.
Thank you both. Cheers.